Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2020 Taiwan International Education Summit, hosted by Zashare and co-organized by the International Research and Action Alliance for Experimental Higher Education, ERAE. My name is Adler, the R&D Director at Zashare and the co-founder of ERAE. I'm the curator of this year's summit and will be your host for the first two English sessions, followed by the closing session in Mandarin, which will be hosted by Zashare's founder, Ozzy Su. Before having our speakers share their fascinating stories and insights, I'd like to provide some background to this year's theme, which may not be so familiar to many friends in education. According to network theory, there are mainly two poles on the network structure spectrum. Those that are more centralized, in which the whole structure is controlled by fewer authorities at its center, and those that are more decentralized, in which power is distributed among actors within the structure. The more centralized networks are typically known for the effectiveness and efficiency, as resources and energy for managing the whole network could be focused on the few centers. However, the main drawback for centralized networks is their fragility. Once the few centers do not behave appropriately or become absent, the whole network becomes dysfunctional. For example, the financial crisis in 2008 exposes the fragility of centralizing at Wall Street. The tragedy that follows COVID-19 also reveals the fragility of centralizing our economic activities and livelihood in urban areas and the regional industrial specialization for the global division of labor. These crises seem distant to our field, education, today. Or at most, many people in education might think, oh, we should just educate the next generation about the subject knowledge, just like we teach knowledge about climate change. However, we rarely change the structural factors in our education system that is perpetuating it. According to system theories, which is the family that network theory belongs to, suggests that many phenomena in our world are fractally structured and emerge from one level to another. To prevent the exacerbation of our civilization's fragility, I believe that we have to examine and change the fragile fractal structure that appears at the level of education. For example, conventional pedagogy typically entails centralizing the teacher to ensure efficiency in knowledge transmission and effectiveness of memory retention, or the efficiency and effectiveness in classroom management. However, let's suppose that students are already used to this pedagogy and are dependent on the structure. Once a teacher ceases to exist, the original learning or classroom management system also tends to become dysfunctional. We can see countless examples in today's workforce and society, such as the inability to continue learning without a teacher figure, or cope with uncertainty or novel situations, ranging from daily challenges to the world's wicked problems. Here, I believe, is where we could learn from the advantages of distributed networks, robustness and resilience. Distributed networks are typically more robust, as they are more capable of bearing shocks or failures of independent actors within the network, because other actors still have the power to continue their function. On the other hand, the self-organizing and adaptive character of distributed networks facilitate recovery from shocks, or even constructively utilizes novelty, making the network more resilient. If a recent crisis, including the 2008 global financial crisis and COVID-19 that we still haven't overcome today, are all symptoms of our civilization's fragile structure, how might education help the world shift towards anti-fragility? This is the core question we'll be exploring today at the 2020 Taiwan International Education Summit from the angle of education technology and higher education. On behalf of Zashare and ERAE, I want to sincerely thank our sponsor, the Taiwan National Development Council, and our partner, AWS EdStart, for making this fruitful exploration possible. Without further ado, let me introduce the first speaker of our session, Dennis Lee. Dennis Lee is the co-founder and CTO of Zone2Grow, a goal-setting and reflection platform where students set learning goals, track their own progress, and write reflections on the learning strategies that work best, or try new ones to try. When looking for speakers in the AWS Start members, I remember my astonishment when discovering Zone2Grow. When countless education technology companies are developing those that I might jokingly call surveillance-based systems, this is one of the rare ones that is actually using technology to support students' autonomy and metacognition, which feedbacks to students' capability to be autonomous. So I immediately decided this is the one we're gonna invite. I can't wait to listen Dennis talk already. Let's welcome Dennis Lee.
Thank you, Adler. Let me just share this presentation. Okay, thank you, Adler and Zasher, for inviting me to speak here today. Over the last few weeks, I've learned a lot. I learned more about Zasher and the conferences that they sponsored in Taiwan. I'm speaking here today as a representative of a US-based company to share some of the ideas that we've been working on, which in the US are considered to be very forward-thinking. And it's refreshing and encouraging to see so many of the ideas we're working on resonate in places beyond the US. And honestly, as someone who has quite a bit of family in Taiwan, I'm excited to be able to share these ideas at a conference like Zasher. Before diving deep into the content of my presentation, I think it might be a little bit helpful to give some more context about myself and the company I represent. So Zone2Grow is an education technology company that was founded about 5 years ago by me and my co-founder, Rupa Gupta. Our product has evolved significantly from when we started, but students in hundreds of schools across the US use Zone2Grow to set learning goals and write reflections on how their learning is progressing and what strategies they're using that are allowing them to be successful. And teachers use our platform to guide students in their goal setting and reflection. And in the last several years, we've received funding from the National Science Foundation to build in machine learning and natural language processing technology into our product to help teachers give better feedback to their students during their learning journeys. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Zone2Grow, and with the help of my team, I built this platform from the ground up. I have a background in both engineering and public policy, specifically in education policy. Before starting Zone2Grow, I worked in software development and analytics roles in the private sector, and I also worked in the education sector as an administrator for a large school district in San Jose, California. So there are two topics that I want to talk about today during my presentation. The first is the reflective practice that is core to the Zone2Grow product and experience. Over the last 5 years, we've worked with many schools that own this practice, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share this practice with this community. I'll take some time to describe what exactly the practice is, how it works, and some of the impact that we've seen in the classroom. And then I want to close my presentation by talking about how we built the reflective practice into our product. I'll speak a little bit generally about how we think about the role of technology in the classroom, how that informs our product development process, and then give a couple examples of how this perspective has shaped real product and design decisions at Zone2Grow. So starting with the reflective practice, using our software, students set goals for themselves, then track their own progress against their goals, and finally do a quick emotional check and write a reflection where they analyze their own progress. In most school implementations, this practice is routinely completed on a weekly basis. In many of the schools that we work with, some form of the first two steps of this practice, the goal setting and the data tracking, may have even been tried before. And in fact, there are some well-known frameworks like writing SMART that support this work. The last part of this practice, reflection, is where we get a lot of intrigue from schools we talk to, and where I want to spend a little bit more time in this presentation. What we found is that carving out the space for students to reflect and analyze their performance can be transformative, in that it gives them the opportunity to build an entirely new set of skills that they can use in all their future learning. Using this time and space, students are able to explore not just whether or not they met their goal, but really think about why they were able to meet it or why not. What we ask students to do is reflect their metacognition muscle. Think about how they think and learn. So why is this important? What we've seen in classrooms where students don't have the space to reflect, even when they complete the first two steps of this practice, the goal setting and the data tracking, can be troubling. For example, consider a middle school student who takes a vocabulary quiz every week on new words. He might set a goal for himself to get an a high grade or an A each week, and could even keep track of all the grades for each one of the vocabulary quizzes that he takes. But what happens when week after week, he doesn't get an A? Maybe he gets a C on the vocabulary quiz, week after week after week. He might simply conclude that he just isn't smart enough to get good grades or doesn't have the innate ability to succeed. The goal setting and progress tracking may actually foster within the student what research calls a fixed mindset. The belief that he has some sort of predetermined ability level, and that cannot be altered no matter how hard he tries. So what we seek to do by giving students the space to reflect is improve their odds of building what research calls a growth mindset, the belief that their abilities can be developed. The reflective practice allows them to discover different strategies or approaches that will develop their abilities. The results of this could be very different depending on the student who's going through the practice. A student, for example, with the vocabulary quiz, a student may decide to do practice quizzes the night before their quiz to make sure they're prepared. They might try a different approach to learning the definitions, like asking a friend what the words mean, instead of relying on the dictionary definitions that are hard for them to comprehend. They may even focus on their emotional or physical well-being by resolving to get a good night's sleep before the big quiz every week. The important thing is that we're creating the space for students to think about different approaches to be successful. If those approaches lead to success, they can continue to rely on them. And if they don't lead to success, they can try something new next time. So I'll give a personal example. I was a pretty good student in high school. I got good grades, and ultimately I was accepted into a great university. But when I started college, I really struggled. I'd never done any computer programming, and I really didn't know how to study computer science. But I got really lucky. I met a group of friends who were having more success than me, and they showed me how to be successful. I learned better time management skills by getting started much earlier on in my programming science. I learned how to seek help. I started going to office hours with those friends, which I had never done before. I sought out internships where I could practice the theory I was learning in the classroom in a practical setting. The result of all of this was that I did far better in the last 2 years of college than I did my first 2 years. But it easily could have gone the other way. I could have maintained what I was doing the first 2 years and come to the belief that, maybe I'm just not cut out to be a software developer. I was fortunate to find these friends who helped me develop the skills that allowed me to be successful. And what we're trying to do at Sown to Grow is take the luck out of it and build a robust practice that sets students up to be successful. So one thing I want to point out is that carving out the space to do reflection is probably not sufficient. It turns out that reflecting is itself a skill that needs to be developed. As part of our funding from the National Science Foundation in the United States, we built a 4-point rubric for grading the quality of reflection. And what we found out is that when initially starting a reflective practice, most students write low quality reflections. They look something like, my goal is to get my grades up. While this might be a fine goal, the student isn't addressing how they're going to accomplish this goal. But with regular practice, and importantly, feedback from their teachers, what we found is that students can improve their reflecting skills. In a study of 6th graders who completed this reflective practice for an entire semester, we found that by the end of the semester, the quality of reflections had significantly improved, where students were writing reflections like this. Over the break, I will study more of my vocabulary. This will help make the I-ready because I need more vocabulary. I'll know when I reach this goal by seeing my I-ready report, and I will try to achieve this goal by the end of the break. So, does this reflective practice work? And is there an impact? So a few years ago, we tried to measure the effectiveness of practice by comparing two similar groups of students in a school, one of which used Sound to Grow, and the practice I described, and one that did not. What we found was at the end of the semester, students who routinely completed this practice on the Sound to Grow platform had higher GPAs than students who did not. When we looked at students who started the year off testing below state standards in math and language arts, the difference between the two groups was even more pronounced. We also conducted pre-post surveys with the two groups of students where we asked them questions on their belief systems as it relates to having a growth mindset and empowerment in their own learning. And what we found was that students who've been shown to grow in this practice scored much higher on these surveys than the group that did not do the practice during the semester. So hopefully by now I've really convinced you that the reflective practice is meaningful, one that can be transformative for students, or at least I piqued your interest to learn more. But what I want to spend the rest of the time talking about in this presentation is how we built an EdTech product around the reflective practice and some of the guiding principles that we rely on when we're building our product. I'll then give some examples of how these principles shape actual decisions around what we build. First, one of the things that we've learned is how critical it is to understand the classroom context. We believe the reflective practice is transformative for students, but we also recognize that schools and educators have many competing priorities. Building metacognitive skills is important, but so is learning math, science, language arts, and social studies content. Even though we believe in the power of reflective practice, the reality is that teachers may not be able to carve out an hour of time each week to allow students to spend time on this practice. Finding out ways to make this practice accessible in the context of all the other things educators are working on is a challenge that we try to tackle. Second, having worked in the education sector prior to founding Sound to Grow, my co-founder and I have a strong belief that in this moment, individuals, teachers, counselors, administrators play a critical role in education, and one that cannot be easily replaced by technology. As such, our approach to building education technology has been to find ways for technology to enhance or improve the relationship and interactions that educators have with students, rather than seeking to replace those interactions. And then finally, generally speaking, technology has often allowed us as a society to function more efficiently. And we believe appropriate application of technology can have the same effect in education. With respect to the reflective practice and the role that teachers play in it, what we seek to do are find ways we can leverage technology to help teachers become more efficient in the reflective practice. So a few examples for how these principles have played out. The reflective practice is a general practice, and really teachers can ask students to set goals, track their progress, and reflect on anything. In fact, when we first started out, we designed the platform to be flexible and allow teachers to define anything they wanted their students to track and reflect on. We then spent a significant amount of time observing and analyzing all the different contexts in which teachers were using our product. And we were able to identify several routines that we believed could be broadly applicable in many classroom contexts. So we took those successful routines and practices and packaged them into out-of-the-box modules that we made available for any teacher who signed up for the product. So for example, one of the most successful practices that we saw teachers having their students track was have students track their grades in all their classes once a week, and then write a reflection on what they would do the next week to improve their grades. So we packaged it up and we created all the necessary scaffolds so that a teacher could get their students signed up and start using this protocol with just a few clicks. And that's this one over here on the left, the weekly academic check-in. Another area we've heavily applied these principles in has been how teachers give feedback to students. So I mentioned before, but feedback is incredibly important in the reflective practice for helping students identify new things that they can try. But understanding the context in which teachers were trying to apply the reflective practice, we saw that many teachers had over 100 students that they needed to respond to each week when they were writing reflections. And it was important for us to find ways to make giving feedback easier and more efficient for teachers. So using a grant from the National Science Foundation, we built machine learning technology that would essentially read the reflections that students wrote and suggest feedback that teachers could give based on the actual content of the reflections. We then use that same technology to allow teachers to group similar reflections together, and then gave teachers the ability to respond to multiple students with similar reflections using the same feedback. We believe that by providing teachers with more efficient mechanisms to give feedback and really leveraging the technology, they'll be able to reach more students and deepen their relationships with them. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover for my talk on the reflective practice and how we went about building the product supported. I just want to say thanks for listening, and you can always go to our website, www.stonetogrow.com, to learn more, or reach out to me directly to learn more. Thanks.
Thanks, Dennis. It's a wonderful talk. And our next speaker is Nasim Nikam. She's the program manager of education technology at Roibi, which means that she's responsible for creating and overseeing educational content for Roibi Robot. But beyond that, she privately told me yesterday that because Roibi is a startup, she basically has to do everything whenever needed. So I hope, Nasim, you're not overworking and are still able to keep a good work-life balance. Of course, the excitement of discovering Roibi is no less than Stone to Grow. First, Roibi is a learning companion robot. It's not the dystopian robot you'll see in sci-fi movies. Second, it doesn't only teach language and STEM skills, but also provides emotional support to the child. I'm very curious about how that's possible. Third, Roibi reduces children's screen time. This is the first technology company I've seen that works towards the direction. And this reminds me of the online articles that said Steve Jobs actually didn't let his child use iPad, and most of his customers do. So another surprise that I heard from Nasim yesterday was that she's working in this technology company with a humanities background. So I'm guessing many of you might also want to know how that's possible. So I'll hand this over to you, Nasim.
Hi, Adler. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I mean, that's the fun thing about being in a startup. You get to do multiple things and learn as you do, which is great. As Dennis mentioned, I'm also honored and excited to be here. And I have also learned quite a lot by listening to what you have, to your guests and what you have created so far. And yes, I am a program manager of education technology at Roibi. I have about 10 years experience in teaching languages, and that's why working at Roibi barely feels like work sometimes, because when you've done this for a long time, you've been in the classroom, you find it quite exciting working with a robot and teaching with a robot. So that's why I think being in a technology company for a humanist is also quite exciting. Today I want to talk a little bit more about Roibi and how its design and its content work together in order to teach young children different languages and STEM skills, and also to instill a love for learning and a joy of discovery in children from an early age that we believe will continue with them and as adult learners in the future. So with that, I will start my presentation. Let me just first make sure I'm sharing my screen here. And I have to say, I have many friends from Taiwan, and I have always wanted to go there, and I wish I was there in person today, but I guess virtually we'll have to do for a while, and then one day I'll get to visit.
Yeah, you're very welcome to be here.
Thank you. It's honestly been a long-term dream of mine, but one day I'll make it.
And it's pretty safe to be here right now.
I've heard, which is really admirable. Well done, you guys. Hopefully we'll get there too soon.
Yeah.
So Roibi was founded in 2019 to create AI-powered technology for early childhood education, and specifically children aged 3 to 7, and to democratize language learning by creating a robust global community. Since then, we have successfully created an award-winning robot recognized by Time magazine as a top 100 inventions of 2019, and received the Tech for Good award in the same year, along with other recognitions. Roibi Robot teaches children aged 3 and older languages and basic STEM concepts. It comes with over 500 lessons, songs and stories for children to play, learn, and have fun with, which can all be managed by its companion app that is compatible with both iOS and Android. So I can first tell you a little bit about Roibi's structure. As you mentioned, Adler, it's not so scary. We think it's quite cute, and that's what we hear from others too. Roibi's built-in camera allows its facial recognition technology to detect a child's emotions and engage directly with them with stories, educational songs, and games. In the very first few lessons, Roibi introduces itself, and it's a story about arriving on Earth from a faraway place in outer space. Lessons on science use Roibi's character as a curious robot who wants to learn so much with the child about the Earth and human discoveries. Its character development ties in the stories together to teach languages and science with fun and with storytelling. Roibi Robot's curriculum designers try their best to avoid assigning a gender to Roibi to keep its character aligned with a robot as an object. Alongside its content, Roibi Robot's physical feature help children bond with it more and engage in learning. Roibi's small size and lightweight body allows the child to carry it everywhere and hold it closely to communicate. Because Roibi Robot has been built to become a companion robot, it does not include humanoid features. It doesn't violate a child's trust with features that the young learner would associate with humans rather than robots. So it starts with being honest, straightforward, from the very beginning, that I'm a robot and I don't look like a human. This combination of design and content creates an effective learning experience for the child. It allows for a self-guided learning experience that can lead to lifelong learning and the joy of seeking knowledge in order to keep parents for children for lifetime. In order to keep parents engaged in this process, we put them in the driver's seat with our app. Roibi Robot's companion app is available to parents for free. The app allows educators and parents to stay on top of the child's advancements and engage with their learning journey. The companion app generates a weekly report that includes the number of words learned, pronunciation score, weekly improvement, and an average weekly time spent with the robot. Additionally, we categorize the words learned into fantastic, fair, and fizzle to engage parents with the child's learning outcome, which is then further encouraged with 3 suggestions for helping the child's development. As part of Roibi's plan to expand the availability of its sophisticated tool both domestically and globally, in 2019, we acquired another venture. It was called KidSense AI, to add technology in children's embedded automatic speech recognition, or ASR, and Edge AI, which means on-device voice recognition, to our robot. KidSense AI utilized the fundamentals of linguistics, neuroscience, and embedded artificial intelligence to build on-device AI and online speech recognition technology for children in multiple languages with more accuracy. This new acquisition brought Roibi a technology that has been developed with a database of over 150,000 children's voices in English, Mandarin, and several other languages, and more than 5 years of data collection and machine learning and machine training, that they are all Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, compliant. And I wanted to show you also the features we use from AWS that allows our technology to function. Because we recognize that our voice recognition technology is the first step in creating an effortless interaction with a child in order to build a rapport and connection. Currently, we can measure the growth or decline of users' interactions with the robot's content. Since a couple of months ago, we've noticed an 84% increase in user interaction with our robot. We believe that this spike was not just as a result of the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders, but also due to the improvements we made to our AI technology and contents that got implemented around March and were the results of extended user research and collaborations with several academics and professionals. So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about how we came about these changes and how we decided on what to change. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we've been facing new challenges regularly, which forces us to become more creative with interacting with our users. And Adler, I call these quite exciting challenges. And again, I think these are all the fun parts about being a part of a startup. We created a community of parents and teachers with whom we regularly connect for user experience research. These engagements with parents made us realize that parents often need guidance on utilizing our technology more effectively at home. We often find ourselves discussing AI and machine learning with parents to inform them about the many possibilities it can provide in education. We noticed when we started focusing on educating our customers about the capabilities of AI and how this can benefit the learners, we've seen more increase in engagement with Roibi Robot, as well as more interest and trust from our customers. Although futurists and scientists tell us that our children will be interacting with AI in some form in the future is inevitable, we are falling behind now in preparing them for that future because we are ourselves unprepared. Because as adults, we're also very new to AI and machine learning. Our aim has been to engage parents, educators, and researchers in creating a research-based and effective product. As a result, we have conducted preliminary user interviews with parents to learn more about the child's home environment and the usage of Roibi Robot. In order to receive more information and feedback, we created a Facebook community of families to involve them directly in our decision-making process and features. From these discussions, we learned that children's parents of children with autism incorporate Roibi's lessons into their child's daily lives to teach them social and communication skills. We've learned that Roibi gradually becomes a part of a child's stories about her family and friends, and that its content makes children more curious about the subjects that the child is introduced to in the lessons. And gradually, children start asking more about the stories and about the concepts that they learn in Roibi and ask their parents for more information, which is something we do want to make sure that children are more curious and become more curious. To continue our outreach, we initiated community feedback and interviews after our close collaboration with Education Alliance Finland. The partnership allowed us to work with 5 kindergarten teachers in Finland who took a Roibi robot to their classrooms to teach English vocabulary to children who had no prior knowledge of English. After months of implementing Roibi in their classrooms, we received a comprehensive review by the teachers that assessed our pedagogical approach at 78% out of a possible 100%. So encouraging. After receiving these results, to learn more about how we can improve Roibi Robot, we had a virtual meeting with a teacher from this study who explained the results and avenues for improvements. Through this research and study, we realized that our content was too advanced for students with no prior knowledge of English and had no regular exposure to the language either at home or in school. However, while these students struggled to engage with the robot independently, the assessment data indicated that they responded well to the content when a teacher guided the interactions. Additionally, the adult-directed co-engagement brought excitement and enthusiasm for continuing arrangements with the robot. These findings resulted in several meetings with our US mentors and the planning to redevelop our current content to teach English to students in the English language countries with prior knowledge or exposure to the English, and to create a separate curriculum for ESL students. Thus, we hired a teacher with an English as a second language or ESL certification to create 100 ESL lessons. Simultaneously, our R&D team started redesigning Roibi Robot's companion app to support the content. We realized these lessons without fee, or we released these lessons without fees in October and are undergoing further research to measure the content's effectiveness. From the early stages of Roibi Robot's formation to its current phases of improvements, the robot's curriculum and technology have always been tied to language development. We've also always made sure that researchers, academics, and teachers are involved in creating the content. That's why our mentorship group includes teachers as well as academics and researchers who regularly advise us on our approach to our teaching. Through research and experimentation, Roibi Robot focuses on school readiness with vocabulary and pre-literacy skills in the transitional pre-K age group. Because of the pandemic and the surge in online learning environments, increasing young children's comfort and ability to learn from technology will be a valued outcome and positively will impact our society. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nassim. I wonder, have you tried visiting the Zashare Expo website yet? Have you?
Oh, I haven't. No, I wish I had.
So
But
you can go to
hopefully next
you and
year.
also other visitors can also go to zashare2020.org.
Okay.
And by listening to your talk, it almost seems like Ozzy has used Roibi before because the website design this time it's a role play game. And all the visitors will become a wandering star which collided accidentally onto Earth and embark their learning journey. So it just sounds incredibly similar to Roibi journey.
That's amazing. See, it's the joy of discovering something new and being in a new place that I guess it's quite universal, right?
Yeah. So I bet you would resonate a lot if you visit the website. It's only going to last until 4 hours later, so you might want to take a look after this.
I'll double check again.
Definitely.
Again. That's great.
Sure. Okay, so now it's our panel time, and I have a few questions for you. And of course, if you have anything to bring up to each other, you're also welcome to do so. I think this is a little bit mentioned by Dennis already, but I'll still like to kind of build on Dennis' point that what are the aspects in education that are difficult to achieve without the aid of education? I'd like to have both of your perspectives. Would anyone like to go first? How about Dennis, you go first since Nassim just finished talking.
All right, can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure, okay. So my question is, what are the aspects in education that are difficult to achieve without the aid of technology?
That is a tough question. I will say the reason I think it's a tough question is because usually what we're thinking about, I think we think about what's happening in the classroom, and we often think about how technology can help.
I see.
I don't necessarily, I think my approach has not been to say like, this will not work for technology, without technology. I think Well, as somebody who's spent time in schools and with a lot of time with educators, I actually see lots of things that work well in education. There are a lot of practices I think are going well. I think what we have to be mindful of is, as our society evolves and technology becomes more pervasive through everything that we do, what are the changes that we need to make to kind of make sure that education is pulled along with the changes in technology overall in society. I will say, I can't speak for education worldwide, but I think the trend has been, at least in the United States, that education is one of the sectors that is a little bit slower to adapt to technology. And there are a variety of reasons for that. Some of them are pedagogical, some of them are political, but there's my sense is that it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. The downside of that is that it appears that education can be slow to adapt to technology. But I would say that the benefit is, because we're a little bit slower, we can be a little bit more thoughtful. And sometimes in other sectors, we see people jump into technology without necessarily considering all the full ramifications of introducing technology. My experience in education is like the folks who are integrating into technology in education need to be a little bit more thoughtful about these types of issues. I think the fact that you have two presenters on stage who have spent a significant amount of time and resources looking into research and really trying to understand, do your products work from like a pedagogy standpoint, like a measuring impact. I think I would love to see that more broadly, but I do overall in education, I do see a lot. We can always do more of that, but yeah. So it's a little bit of a long-winded answer to your question.
I see. As a American with Taiwanese origin, I wonder if you know the term 知行合一.
Yeah.
So it means like,
maybe you can translate.
Okay, 知行合一 means like your consciousness is in line with your actions. So by listening to your response, I was getting goosebumps because I feel that you are practicing the metacognition that you are championing for. You're not rushing people into, oh, you should go to do education technology, as we might often hear in many occasions. And if you don't adopt technology, you are gonna something. So it's kind of like, using some pretty forceful ways to convince people. But the way that you conveyed your message is very thoughtful and also very metacognitive. So I really resonate to what you say. How about
we try
Nassim?
to practice what we preach.
That sounds great. I also agree with Dennis. I think education have worked, all this time, and we've had successful, students, successful or not. We've had teachers teaching and students coming and graduating and going. So education, sure, it can function without technology, but likewise, we look at how education can help, how technology can help education by helping the educator and by also helping the student. I've been teaching for many years, and I think teaching is a very creative process. You have to come up with lesson plans that matches your students' goals, that it fits their personalities, their interests, and their level, no matter what you're teaching. But also you have to be able to, sit with a child and understand how to help them more understand this concept, what you can help them with to improve something or to make them more interested in another subject. But then there are other tasks like grading, coming up with a list of things that a child or a student needs to improve on, that we think technology can help speed up or at least take care of for a teacher, so then the teacher can focus on the more creative aspects of teaching in a classroom. So that's why, for our app, we wanted to make sure we have pronunciation scores and we highlight the words that need more focus on. So an educator or a parent can look at them and focus more on those words with the child, rather than repeating things that the child has already mastered and is doing well. So I think, I can only detail Dennis by saying technology can help teachers and students with their work and with their learning process, rather than completely like replacing them or promising that it will make everything much better.
Yeah, so by saying that, letting the teacher to focus more on the creative aspect, it kind of reminds me of the washing machine, like releasing our time and energy. Instead of washing our clothes, we can do something else. So it kind of follows that line, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yes, I guess, yes.
Yeah, so the other question I do have is, are there any advice that you guys like to give to those who are planning to get involved into maybe like starting a project on education technology, or educators who are thinking of incorporating them? And also, Nassim, you mentioned that your background is in humanities, so maybe for those people who have background in humanities but still wanting to do technological stuff in education, you might provide some insightful advice to them.
Sure. Well, my background is in humanities, and Dennis said that his background is in technology. And I think in order to have a successful team and, of people who are working in education technology, you need educators as well as technologists. Together, they can create something that works in the classroom or for parents at home, and that focuses on education. I feel like we're in the cusp of change. We're just learning about what really doesn't work and what can work. And this is where I think a lot of exciting new innovations and changes are going to happen in technology. And I don't think we only need, programmers or engineers. All respect to them, they do great work. But if you haven't been in a classroom and if you have never taught a group of students, it will be very difficult to speak for a teacher or to create something that works for a teacher. So I think coming with either experience or education in education is as beneficial as being a programmer or an engineer. If someone's goal is to be in edtech and to be involved in these discussions, because as we said, technology is not here to replace teachers or become a completely new teaching method. It's just here to help and assist. And if you haven't experienced that, it's not easy to help and assist.
It seems like the advice that you just gave is very in line with Dennis' experience as well, right? As Dennis, you have served you served in schools before, in districts.
Yeah, so both me and my co-founder used to work in a school district. To be totally fair, I didn't have teaching experience. I was a district administrator. My co-founder was also a district administrator, but I 100% agree with Nassim, her point that if you want to be in ed tech, you have to understand the context. You have to spend the time to get to know teachers, understand the actual problems that they're trying to have. And so on our team, we've tried to fill that gap by hiring former teachers onto our team and making sure that whenever we're releasing new features, we have somebody with teaching experience who's looking at it, thinking about not only like, does this look good, but like, can this actually be used in the classroom? And they can give us their feedback in terms of like, well, if I was a teacher or if I was actually in the classroom trying to do this, these are the bottlenecks or these are the obstacles that I would have trying to do this. And that has been, it's been critical for us to have that perspective as we're building. There are, I don't want to name names, but there are a lot of organizations that were started out there with people who had zero teaching experience, thinking like, I've worked in technology, and I know technology has had a huge impact. I can save the world, I can save education. It's simply not that. It's not that easy, There are a lot of embedded systems within education, a lot of politics. Understanding the nuances is critical to being successful. The other thing I'll just say is like, having success or building an edtech product, it takes a lot of time. I know there are a lot of folks who are passionate about technology, and they see, whatever companies like the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world starting up and making and scaling very fast and making lots of money, to be honest. And like, it's education technology. You if you want to get into it, you need to be in it for the right reason, because it's a slog. And if you don't have the passion for being in technology, it's going to be very hard for you to ride the wave and all the bumps that come with it as you're going on the entrepreneurial journey. The last thing I'll say is just like, a great place to start, I think, if you don't have teaching experience, obviously is try to find your way into schools. We had folks on our team who volunteered after work at school just so they could remember kind of and interact with kids and teachers, getting that opportunity. But if you are able to also join like an existing ed tech company and understand how they operate, that can also be very valuable in terms of getting started.
I see. I wonder if there are any things that you like to ask each other, or anything to add in the last 10 minutes.
I have a question for Dennis. I love what you do, and I completely agree with being able to set goals. I think even as adults, I learned the values of setting goals much later as an adult. But to be able to set goals, you also have to know how to set goals so you're not setting yourself for failure. So I like the process of introducing the students to the concept. They set goals and go. Do you teach them beforehand about how to set goals? Because I feel like I had to learn much later in life, and I had to learn how to set goals and expectations that are actually like, they're doable. Do you talk to children beforehand?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Goal setting is a skill too. I talked about in my presentation that reflection is a skill, but goal setting is as much of a skill as well. And again, there are a lot of, I think there's been a lot more work done in the space of goal setting, right? So I think there are frameworks out there, like I mentioned in my talk, like SMART goals, where you're trying to create things that are specific, measurable, actionable, time-based. But there's been a lot more research done on goal setting and things that you can do there. And so in our product right now, we don't have something that kind of onboards people for goal setting. We have spent a lot more time on the reflection process and like helping. And honestly, like those two things they work in tandem, right? Because you set a goal and then you reflect. But usually when you're reflecting, you're also you may be modifying your goal. So for example, if you set something that was too aggressive and say like, hey, I'm going to get 100 on all of my tests this year. And then you realize after the first test, wow, I'm actually pretty far behind. Like maybe a moderate goal first to get me there is the right place to start. Like they kind of work in a little bit in tandem. So that's something that we're actually working on at Center Rose. Is we've created kind of a platform that allows you to do this reflective process. And we've tried to build in like a lot of scaffolds to make it at least the structure very easy to get started with. What we're now moving towards is actually things that are more curriculum-based. So like, how do you teach goal setting skills? How do you teach, and some of the other things we're talking about also is like building social emotional skills. Like what is a curriculum like for that?
Right.
And it's a bigger challenge for us right now because we don't have, we're just starting out. There are certainly other people who have done some of this work a little bit better. So we're a little bit learning as we go, but that's the direction that we're trying to head. Because I think if you're trying to reach teachers, to engage them in this process, we have to acknowledge that a lot of the teachers they haven't been trained. And so if you want them to use this process, you have to also provide some of the training. So we're working on that. Nice,
exciting. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Awesome. I wonder if Dennis have anything to add or ask Nassim.
I'm actually just really impressed with the technology you guys have and the AI. I think so. I have two kids. One is a 4-year-old and one is about to turn 2. And actually we have kind of like these storytelling. They're not, I wouldn't call them robots, but like they're storytelling software where there's like a bear shaped with like a bear shaped toy that you press play or whatever, and it can read you stories, it can sing songs or whatever. But like the thing that stood out to me is like you guys have technology that can actually analyze the reactions of kids, and that seems very powerful.
Thank you.
Like I imagine there's just a wealth of things that you can do. If you can sense a kid is sad, you can tell them a different type of story as opposed to if they're really excited, or when you check whether a kid is excited about a story, like the next story, maybe the first story was about dragons and you're like, okay, well the next story can be about dinosaurs because you seem to really respond about that. Like
Exactly.
I'm actually very curious to learn more a little bit about like where your AI technology is in terms of like being able to do the next thing. If you could give some examples about that.
Yes, no, exactly. That's a good point. We do actually have the capability right now to do it. In order to, because that's why the camera is there. So it can see how the child feels about a lesson. And with machine learning, then make sure that the next lessons are the lessons that the child wants and the child is interested in. But it can also initiate conversations if a child is not being happy. It's like sitting in, not happy, or can recognize with its voice that if the child is kind of upset or not in a good mood. So it can then bring in fun stories that the child liked and reacted well in the past. And those are the things we're working on to release soon, hopefully, and to be able to work on more. But what we wanted the robot to do in order for it to be a practical and effective companion robot was to be able to interact with the child. And that's what the facial recognition, the AI and machine learning would allow. Because through this interaction, that the child would feel closer to a robot that understands it, rather than sitting in passively listening and watching the videos or listening to the stories. The child can also respond back. And we also regularly ask for the child's opinion. What did you think? To be able to form an opinion. And we know some children are pretty good at it, but it's really good to also be able to have a conversation, learn about listening and speaking at a certain time, and also to be opinionated and to be able to pick important parts of a story and respond back rather than just listening. So for us, these features were crucial from day one, and they were part of the plan from day one. And I'll give that credit to our founders, because Roibi was going to be a companion robot, and that it wanted to follow an interactive learning experience, an active learning experience, rather than a passive one.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah, thank you.
As Nasim, you mentioned that, the Roibi robot could detect the emotions of the children. That's how the emotional part of Roibi comes in. I'd like to build upon that to ask both of you one last question is, can you tell us how do both of your technologies address the health aspect of, or the well-being aspect of students' growth?
So Adler, just to understand your question correctly, you wanted to know how the technology helps with the emotional well-being of children.
Yeah, and also you mentioned that we talked about the screen time reduction part, right?
Yes, exactly. We actually, yes, true. Why not screens? Screens are not horrible things. I mean, there are good programs on TV and are accessible on apps, but obviously not so much. And also sitting in passively and listening and watching is something that does not necessarily help children with learning, especially for long hours. We recently had an independent researcher contacting us from University of Texas and telling us specific numbers that he had actually observed, which got us quite excited. But the reason Roibi's screen is quite small is because it only shows what is part of the lesson, only the amount of information that is needed for the child to learn about a concept. But also by sort of, by showing only one image and one specific picture for that lesson, it helps with opening up the child's sense of creativity and filling in the blanks with everything else that's not available there, but the only thing that they need to learn with that one word or with that one concept. And also we have many lessons about emotions and how facial features can show humans' emotions, how body language can show someone's emotion, and what does that mean? So it's one of actually our earliest lessons. So in order for us to teach children about being happy, being sad, being excited and being scared, they're all emotions. And Roibi says that it's exciting, humans can feel all of these, they're so cool and so exciting, as part of emotions that children need to learn. So not only it's technology and facial recognition, voice recognition help with that, but the content and what Roibi discusses and teaches the child also reinforces the same message.
Is there anything that you'd like to add, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, emotional well-being is it's a very hot topic. To be honest, like me and my co-founder could probably spend a 15-minute presentation talking about how we're working on emotional well-being. I think especially at least in the US right now, with the whole pandemic situation, there are so many schools that are in a remote context. And so right now, teachers aren't getting the same read on their students' emotional well-being as they normally would. And that has been a very real struggle. Like normally in school, a teacher, can speak to a student outside of class or in the hallway and understand how they're feeling. And they're not being able to do that right now in the remote context. And so our product has been able to really fill a gap because in this pandemic situation, because over the summer, we built out an emotional kind of well-being check-in module that tons of schools have been getting on, just to give students a chance to write about. First of all, in the module, they basically indicate how they're feeling, on a very sad to very happy sort of scale, and maybe neutral in the middle. But then also writing about what's going on with them personally during the week. So it actually has nothing. That module has nothing to do with academics. It's really about the kid writing about like how is your week going and other things that you need support on. And so there have been some very dramatic things that we've heard. We've heard students writing about having relatives who are contracting COVID. We've heard students feeling stressed and anxious because they can't see their friends anymore. And so like our platform has at least allowed a communication means for students to inform their teachers of what they're feeling. The other thing that we're working on right now is actually we started with kind of that reflective practice, but our company is getting deep into social and emotional learning skills right now. And so we realize that the reflective practice can be a big part of building social emotional skills. So things like self-awareness, self-regulation, perseverance, having students be able to reflect on how they're feeling about those things, or where their skill level is, and what are things that they could do to build some of those skills, we realize is a very powerful thing. So in the next 2 or 3 months, we're hoping to release a new module within our software that is going to be basically something that teachers can use out of the box to teach social emotional skills and have their kids go through a reflective practice that builds those skills. So we very much care about well-being, and it's very much an active area of development for our company.
It's very exciting to hear your further developments. And actually, when I saw Stone to Grow, it reminds me of those adult emotional diaries, either in physical paper or in an app, to reflect on your emotional ups and downs and come up with strategies in coping your emotions. So if Stone to Grow is going towards that direction, it looks very exciting. So as I believe there are just so many things that both of you can share, but I hope this is just a beginning, that all of our audiences, if you're interested, I believe you can email to either Roy B or Stone to Grow, and they'll be willing to answer your questions. So thank you, Nasim and Dennis, for showing out how might it be possible to support the holistic development of learners through education technology. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, Adler.
Bye-bye.
Bye.